Oh boy, we're falling into this rabbit hole pocket of the animation industry right now. This is a movie that recently dropped by Netflix as their latest animated feature, and we've covered a handful of Netflix movies like that in the past. I kind of see this as the same kind of pocket as Thelma the Unicorn earlier this year, as well as Adam Sandler's Leo from last year. But this weekend, we got another new installment to add to the collection, and it's being handled by an animation studio we have a little bit of history with. But only a little bit, because they've only got a short history themselves. This is Netflix's Spellbound. You may have heard murmurs of news about this thing being in production. I certainly kept a vague eye on it without really a release date. But picture my surprise when I finally sat down to watch it on Netflix, and the big words, Skydance Animation, pops up in front of us. And I didn't know exactly what I was reading. I didn't fully remember directly what the animation studio was. However, looking into it, this is the same production company that created the elusive Luck movie. AKA, this is John Lasseter's tail between his legs post-Pixar production studio. I guess that explains why in the trailers they advertise Spellbound as from the visionary of Toy Story. It's a John Lasseter movie, yay. Now, the last Luck movie wasn't exactly great by my counts, so let's see just how Spellbound is gonna go, and I'll be honest, it's not on the greatest start. Ethically, already, I'm gonna be a little against it. So, the movie tells the story of Princess Elian, a young girl on her 15th birthday who has spent an unknown amount of time covering up the fact that her parents, the king and queen of the kingdom, have been transformed into literal giant monsters. And I'll be honest, I actually think that's a really interesting idea to go on with. This is very clearly, I mean, just look at the visuals. For a start, it looks just exactly like Luck, but now with elven-esque ease and fantasy as a setting. But this is clearly going for that Disney style of musical princess animation. So to hear that the story isn't exactly just Princess going out to find her true love, and it's instead about breaking the curse of their parents who have been, what do you know, spellbound, I actually really like conceptually at the core. And even more so than that, I actually am quite a big fan of the actual world building of this movie, weirdly enough. It's in this unfortunate case where CGI animation has gotten so good that everything, even the slightly dodgier stuff, looks pretty damn good. But this, to me, I kind of just like the setting. Sure, it's generic fantasy with some good classic highly saturated color palettes, but I don't know, there's something at least somewhat enthralling that I want to take the backgrounds and use for poster designs or something. I love the great green fields, the bright blue sky, but also the creatures, the fantasy setting, the monsters themselves, like as the parents, that's alright, but like flying leopard cat monsters, that's a really nice piece of the monsterology that this world is clearly inventing. It's certainly a lot better than the Luck universe they tried to invent in Luck, which half made sense and half fell apart entirely. Now, as you would probably come to expect, Princess Elian is then going to have to go on a quest to try and find a way to break the curse for fear of the transformation of their parents being permanent and them being ousted from the town. Fair enough, typical, alright, let's see where it goes, right? Now, obviously, of course, I am very much, let's acknowledge, not the target audience for this film. This may be a film that is the offshoot of Pixar, who very much claim that these movies are made for everybody. And this film, yeah, maybe it could be for everybody, but clearly, you know, approaching 30 here. I am a little bit on the back foot here. Although some of the thematics and messagings towards the end of the film maybe will reflect, we'll see once we get to it vaguely as we somewhat go chronologically through this plot a little bit. Although we will quickly come to see there's never really any real stakes in this narrative. It's still very much, the magic of Pixar, but without the magic of Pixar in the center. It's a little bit lukewarm, but we'll get into that. Because you see, in general, for me, I think this movie leaves me a little bit split in a weird few directions of ways. I mean, sitting through the opening, it is very much an elongated, long piece of setup. We spend 30 minutes dealing with the idea of, oh, my parents are monsters, whoa! But it does all of the classic Disney beats correctly, it looks visually nice, and there are some elements I like. I enjoy, oddly enough, the slapstick humor that's attached to only the old lady character. And some of the gags I genuinely find surprisingly enjoyable. Maybe it's because it puts me in a giddy mood to know that I'm covering a terrible, probably John Lasseter movie. I don't know. But at the same time, this is very clearly a by-the-numbers pseudo ripoff. It's safe and simplistic and unchallenging in a lot of ways. Whilst, of course, there's all sorts of star-studded cast involved in the voice talent with Rachel Zegler, John Lith, Javier Bardem, Nicole Kidman, as well as our classic John Ratzenberger. Of course he's involved. He's involved in every John Lasseter production. His name's getting mildly more stained, that becomes the fact, but that is the fact. He gets chewed on by one of the monsters, he's one of the guards. And by all accounts, these people serve their roles well. It's a palatable movie, and is probably quite notable from the fact that this is actually currently number 6 on Netflix at the time of watching and recording this. But the fact still remains this is a John Lasseter movie, so I, at least in my cynical, direct, realist ways, I'm always gonna, not exactly put this as top 5 anytime soon of the year. But eventually, the setup comes to a close. There's some nice artistic choices, especially when it comes to these song numbers, because yes, this is full-on Disney musical territory. I actually really like a lot of the choreography in these music numbers. It genuinely feels like a good showcase of animation, because clearly, there are talented people involved in the animations. One of my personal favorites is there is a part with a ruined room with a leak that's hitting piano strings to create the beginning of the song. That's just like really well done, artsy-fartsy crap that I like. But anyway, let's switch away a bit from the story and go into the animation style in general, because as you can see, it's very much trying to mimic that Disney style. Specifically, maybe Tangled was the vibe that I was getting the most out of this. Maybe it's the forest setting we come to later, but the magical kingdom and the funky animal companions, it just really reminded me of that, as much as a companion is every Disney movie, but Tangled fits the bill the best. Everyone has these big doughy eyes, really smooth textures, and everything's just really clean. I mean, seriously, they make a whole thing of these monsters causing destruction in the palace, but even that looks somehow managed and taken care of. I mean, it's an aesthetic that I personally really, really like for some reason, but even still, it is a little bit out of place for the theme they're going for. It also kind of reminds me of Disney's Strange World, which again, is a world building that I really like, particularly on the surface. The story for itself is, not that great. Apparently, I like the concepts around movies more than the movies themselves as of late. But yes, and then moving on to the songs, did you guys even see the trailers for this? Did you know this was a musical? I don't think that was involved in these trailers. There seems to be a running theme of marketing teams never wanting to advertise a musical movie as a musical, and I don't know why. I don't think they used even one of the songs in any of the marketing at all. Was it because it shared a release date with another magical witch? I don't know. Something made them scared about this Wick-bound weekend. Spell-ed? None of those work. I'm just gonna stop the Barbenheimer attempt here. The songs themselves, they're okay. It's very much just hitting the same Disney beats. The first one's weird. It's all about Ellen struggling to cope with having to be the kid who is saving face in front of the whole kingdom, whilst her parents tear up the place behind closed doors, but it's really happy for some reason. I don't know, it was a bit of a tonal clash for me personally. Maybe that was on purpose, but it just seemed like an odd choice to me. That being said, the choreography against most of these songs are brilliant. After dealing with a lot of terrible movies where they just outright delete the background, to see genuine flourishes and choreography incorporated with the environments they're surrounding itself with genuinely impresses me, and it bothers me every time I'm happy about something I see. But anyway, as the plot continues, no surprise to anyone, the secret gets out, and Elian with her parents have to flee for the dark forest of eternal darkness. Yes, that is the real name of where Act 2 of this movie takes place, and this is another thing. This movie at times jumps between parodying these classic fairy tales, trying to imitate them, and then later on, critiquing them a little bit, but it never really picks a lane. It goes back and forth between a few of these a fair few times, to the point I started to struggle to know if I should be laughing at it at all. And I think Luck has this same problem, that it doesn't know if it's a parody or unironic or some mix of the two. It's tonally confused, a lot of these movies, and I think the visuals and ideas of these movies is better than the final product. Somewhere along the line, the decision-making gets a little bit fumbled. The Pixar polish is missing in these movies. But even then, there's a lot of choreography and specific moments that I find absolutely brilliant. Like when they're running away, for a start, they reinvent the phone for some reason, but it's a phone that can grant wishes, I guess. They end up animating some cages and recreate a classic Disney carriage with a flying carpet. But I also really like one of the wishes is for a bunch of flags to become acrobats to capture the guards to disrupt their chase, which is really fantastic flourishes and ideas that I'm I adore the magical choreography decisions more so than the bigger picture. It's really fascinating. I'm not sure if that's a joke or just a good flourish, but my god, when it comes to the actual jokes, they are terrible for the most part. I think I sniggered a couple of times at the violence, or like a dramatic pause, but there were so many moments where the film paused for a laugh, and I just stared back at the screen. I'm fairly emotive when I watch these things, especially for the first time. Take, for example, the guards. Sometimes they're a winner when they are in fully padded armor, so you can't see their face, and then there's party blowers popping out between the heavily armored visor. You know, that's kind of amusing. Other times, they're being chewed on by a monster, and then John Ratzenberger's voice comes out saying, "Chew away, sire." And it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess he just wanted to get his cameo in there. But anyway, as the story goes on, they go on to get a little bit more inventive. There's this tunnel where if you say angry things, they turn into projectiles that bounce off of the walls, whereas if you tell delicate, nice things, you can practically float on the sound waves. That felt kind of inside-outy, but it was creative enough that I really, really enjoyed it. And it's a nice set piece as much as it's kind of a narrow tunnel, but the lighting's nice. Similarly, there's this idea of a dark tornado that will consume you if you have too many bad thoughts, which is an interesting magic system, somewhat of a threat that's always looming, but not really. All the while, they're being chased by the kingdom's guards the whole time, who are clearly on the side of the princess, but she's running away from them the whole time. So the stakes of them almost capturing them is like, yeah, but they're on your team. That's your kingdom's people, and they will like you and probably listen to your words once you talk. Like, it's like that stake of, oh, we're being chased, kind of gets lost along the wayside. But hey, it's not about the chase. It's about the human connection with these monsters. Totally. Not that we see many other monsters of the wild world, really. Just the main two parent guys. Hey there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. Come along and subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with new animated movie reviews. Let me know your thoughts on Spellbound as well, and since you're subscribed, let's get to the second half of the video. They also add another thing of John Lithgow being body swapped from a human to a hamster, like, again, going for that buddy Disney princess companion, but making him have a voice now instead of being the silent, stupid type. But still, this movie, especially in its early points, you know, never really got me, you know? It's kind of flat and bland and standard. Princess has a problem with her parents, they go to the magical world, they speak to a couple of guys, and they go into a log. The parents part is the first 30 minutes, the log is the middle 30 minutes. There's also a sequence with quicksand, which is really interesting. Again, I like the set more than the story. There's a moment where they have to get across a little sand dune, and every time it's in the shade, it becomes liquidy quicksand. That's really fascinating, and it goes into this idea that the parents are arguing on whose is better. Oh, also, by the way, at this point after the log, the parents start being able to talk. They become slowly more human over the journey, for some reason, being exposed to magic. That's not really explained. Some of these ideas are really interesting, other times not. There's a little extract about wild animals and looking after the parenting on that front, and that reflecting something or other. Eventually, as we come to see more of the leopard-winged cat family, the one of two other wild creatures we really see other than more of the hamster guy, who has his own hamster song in the underground but doesn't really contribute to the story. It's just plugged in there as a, where did they go? Brief moment. Eventually, the monsters come to learn who they fully are. They learn to speak, they understand their words, and then they realize they are the king and queen of their past kingdom. It's almost slightly emotive that they're like, you are my daughter. Whoa. If it wasn't that they'd specifically already covered that beat, but saying, you are my dogger. What is a dogger? But anyway, it's the final 30 minutes where this movie really has something to say, probably justifies the whole thing being made, and maybe pulls it off. Let's go into the territory of spoilers as we get to the final moments, right? So, once they reach the magical source that can fix their parents, the Lake of Light, the parents, who can now speak, hesitate before going into the light. Or more, the light hesitates from then because it won't let them in to be transformed because they remember fighting so much in the past, and that's actually what caused them to transform into this beast form in the first place. The darkness of the forest latches onto negative emotions, and if the person becomes consumed, they are transformed. So whilst this whole time we've been trying to bring the parents back to the way they were before, the whole thing is a metaphor for divorced parents. Alright, great, classic. I'm glad that they managed to address it. It was very last minute, and I guess the point is that the child narrator at the start doesn't really understand or notice how much their parents dislike each other. But I thought this was a pretty interesting and fresh avenue to go down, and it also twisted the story into a typical style of the morale that's aimed at kids, and it's actually a little bit more aimed at adults. So maybe this is made for everybody, I don't know. I may be aiming at 30, but I don't have children. And so the argument becomes the parents don't want to become those people of the past again. They can't go back to the way it was before. Sometimes it's better to break apart than try and stay together. Two people aren't always compatible, and that demonstrates quite nicely in this story. A little bit last minute and kind of shallowly presented, but I like the idea, the concept. And so on that revelation becomes the final climax of the movie, where the big dark thoughts tornado finally consumes the daughter, who breaks down over the idea of her parents not being able to go back to the way they were and always leaving her out in their decisions. As if going under the assumption that they don't love her, and asking what about her the entire time after she's given so much of the last year trying to get them back together, or at least back to their human forms. This, I think, is a really nice, mature beat to go down. And of course at that point as well, everything else goes wrong possible. The guards catch up, the princess is away from them, so they capture the monsters separately. They muzzle the monsters this entire time after doing that never before, so that's just to get rid of the whole they can explain who they are at this point. But also, the Flinks, the little hamster guys, immediately pop up to help defend and break the people out. They immediately break the monsters out. They all manage to talk and then are immediately on board to address the big dark tornado. It all happens very quickly and very much feels a little bit too rushed for my liking. But also, the solution to this story, right? I think is also a little bit missed of an opportunity. See, I always took it as Princess Elia is distraught over the fact that her parents are staying separated. Also, of course, there's the element that they're monsters now, but at least they're conscious monsters, so it's not the end of the world. But the solution they come up with this story, whilst nice visually, is that they pour the lake of light into the dark tornado to make her feel better. The message is the idea that the parents are in the wrong, not for trying to be separate and being divorced eventually, but because they didn't communicate enough to their child that they love her. The idea is that Elia is distraught because she believes her parents don't love her anymore, and that's why they're arguing and splitting. So the answer is, tell your child you love her, which I don't think really addresses the real problem, that is, the parents are divorced and can't go back to the way they were. Even still, visually, it's nice pouring literal manifestation of light into the darkness, but it also very much feels like, you know, she's in there slashing away at her happy memories when they're all a happy family, and then light sparkles around her, and she's like, oh, okay, well, that's nice. Now I like these memories. There's, again, really nice highlights in the musical elements, like the choreography of talking to her miraging younger self, saying that things are going to be okay. That's brilliant. It's all the context around it, the actual story narrative that I think could be deeper, because this looks like a genuine conceptual great movie. But somewhere along the way, it's gotten muddled as it became a final product. This was the exact same scenario with the Luck movie. The concept of playing around with luck is great. The world building didn't make a lot of sense. And the world building here is nice with some of the creatures, but there's two of them. There's flying leopard cats, but they're white, and then the hamsters. There is no real characters. I think there's 3 in the castle. The old man who gets swapped with a hamster, the secondary advisor who's there to be there, and then the head of the guards. And I guess then slapstick old lady at the start who's a bit of a punchline. There's just not enough, I want to say ensemble work, but ensemble work clearly makes movies terrible. But this film feels too shallow in all of the ideas it could go on to present. At the very start of the movie, we see that Elian has a whole bunch of friends who each ride their own cat dragon. That, I think, is fascinating, and I'd love to see the cat dragons used more. They're used by the guards. It's not really a flourish of, wow, isn't this magical? I think something's lost there. Maybe if the friends were the one chasing after her and getting involved with the story, that could have been better, because it feels like small party goes on the run, the rest of that small party come to join, they reach at the mountain, and then they all are there at the same time to do a very shallow solution to what could be a bigger, more dynamic, emotional story. There's a little bit of that emotionally smart bit of storytelling that definitely sets it apart from just being another Disney imitation. I mean, there's no love interest, so that's nice. And it is one that I honestly wasn't fully expecting because, you know, seeing Elian reacting to her mother and father beginning to fight again, they were arguing and fighting in their monstrous forms all the way through this journey. The signs were still there. And having the parents realizing that they had forced their child into this horrible midpoint between the two of them was a surprisingly smart and refreshing moral for this kind of story, but I think it just could have been executed better in a lot of ways. I wish that this emotional maturity could have been better executed at the end and felt more deliberately throughout the rest of the film. But hey, bonus points for infusing modern family dynamics into the fairy tale structure, but for me, it was just a little bit too late of a kind of scenario. In the epilogue 1 year later, the monsters have turned back into humans, and they do actually come to the more correct choice of don't just tell your child you love them, they actually do live in separated houses. That is nice. They have a big audience for a birthday party for her 16th. They don't address the fact that she was going to become queen, so that doesn't become the real ending. Everyone and their mother comes in very, very quickly, every character we've practically seen. There's a finale song, and then we cut very soon afterwards. It's very, not necessarily by the numbers, but it's get in and get out, absolutely. Or the best way to put it, Spellbound has all the same John Lasseter problems as Luck, minus the more notable John Lasseter problems that are there. World building wise and visually, it is a real nice feast to enjoy. Conceptually, there's a really nice story in there, and the execution of the musical numbers are absolutely fantastic, but there's a sense of depth and polish that is missing, and a little bit less entrancing than Spellbound could have fully been. A rather bland affair with a slightly cleverer ending, but not enough to redeem it as an amazing movie anytime soon. And that's at least my preliminary review on Netflix and John Lasseter's freshly released Spellbound. We'll probably do a full, in-depth, amazing, terrible hybrid video, maybe in January or February time. But for now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do tell me your thoughts on Spellbound. Did you see it? Have you seen the trailers? What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, and I shall see you in a little bit.